Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Monday, March 10th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside today will be pleasant, with a high of 74.3 degrees and a low of 50.8. Coming up on today's show, we'll examine how China is implementing a new strategy in its ongoing trade disputes with the United States, potentially shifting the economic landscape between the two superpowers. We'll also look at why the leading U.S. health agency is offering buyout packages to a majority of its workforce, and what this means for public health services. Plus, we'll explore the persistent difficulties law enforcement faces in accurately determining marijuana impairment in drivers, despite legalization spreading across the country. All this and more coming up on Alex's News. Good morning, viewers. The U.S.-China trade relationship has taken another dramatic turn as Beijing demonstrates it's learned valuable lessons from previous trade conflicts. Joining us now is our international economics correspondent, Ethan Parker, with more on this developing story. Ethan, it seems China was much better prepared this time around when tariffs came back?
That's right, Grace. According to BNN Bloomberg, China has undergone a remarkable transformation in how it handles trade disputes with the United States since former President Trump's first term. When faced with new tariffs after Trump's return to office, Beijing showed a much more calculated response. They weren't caught flat-footed this time. Instead, they've deployed what analysts are calling a sophisticated toolkit of countermeasures developed through their earlier trade war experiences.
What specific actions has China taken in response to these renewed tariffs?
BNN Bloomberg reports that China's leaders have publicly stated they're open to negotiations, but they've simultaneously prepared for the 20% increase in U.S. tariffs we've seen since Trump returned to office. Their response has been both swift and targeted, implementing retaliatory taxes, specifically on U.S. farm goods, and suspending American lumber imports. It's a much more surgical approach than we saw during the first trade war.
I understand China has also been working to reduce its economic dependence on the U.S. Can you shed some light on those efforts?
I see what you did there with the lumber reference, Grace. According to analysis from Perplexity API, China has implemented several key strategies since the first Trump administration. They've launched what they call a dual circulation strategy, emphasizing domestic demand and self-reliance, particularly in science and technology. They're also strengthening relationships with the global South, building stronger ties with emerging economies across Southeast Asia, South Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America.
Are these diversification efforts bearing fruit for Beijing?
In some areas, absolutely. BNN Bloomberg points out a telling example. China now purchases most of its soybeans from Brazil and Argentina instead of the U.S., significantly reducing its dependence on American exports. You could say they've been quite successful in that particular sector. But Perplexity API notes the results overall have been mixed. While China has made strides in reducing U.S. economic dependence, complete decoupling remains challenging, as America continues to be a significant trading partner.
How does this fit into the broader geopolitical picture between these two superpowers?
The Small Wars Journal, published just yesterday by Arizona State University, places these trade tensions within a much larger context. Their analysis suggests China is sending a clear message that the U.S. cannot halt its rise. The journal also highlights China's adaptation to trade wars alongside its ambitions in disruptive technologies, indicating this is part of a larger strategic vision for economic resilience. All this is happening while China's military is reportedly threatening a tighter noose around Taiwan if separatist movements increase.
So what's the takeaway here? Has China effectively tariff-proofed its economy?
Not entirely, Grace. While they've certainly developed more economic insulation, Perplexity API reports that China's efforts to internationalize the renminbi still lag behind the U.S. dollar as a global reserve currency. Similarly, while their retaliatory measures have impacted U.S. exports, they haven't fundamentally altered the overall trade dynamic between the two nations. What we're seeing is a more resilient China, but not an invulnerable one.
Fascinating insights, Ethan. Thanks for helping us understand this complex economic chess match between the world's two largest economies. That's story 1 of 3 this morning. We'll be right back. In a major development from Washington, the Department of Health and Human Services is offering thousands of employees a buyout package as part of the administration's efforts to shrink the federal workforce. Joining us now with more details is our health policy correspondent, Chloe Parker. Chloe, this seems like a significant move. What exactly is being offered here?
That's right, Grace. According to reporting from Time, citing an Associated Press investigation, the Department of Health and Human Services is offering a voluntary separation package worth up to $25,000 to most of its approximately 80,000 employees. This is no small matter. We're talking about buyouts affecting workers across multiple critical health agencies, including the CDC, NIH, and FDA.
$25,000 to walk away from your government job? I guess they're really serious about trimming the fat from the federal budget? How much time do employees have to make this life-changing decision?
It's a remarkably tight timeline. As reported by 10TV.com and MedPage Today, employees have until 5 p.m. this Friday to respond, just 4 days from now. This rapid timeline is part of President Trump's broader initiative to cut government costs. And when we talk about HHS, we're discussing an agency that manages a massive $1.7 trillion annual budget, so the pressure to reduce expenditures is immense.
I understand HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been vocal about wanting to make cuts. What's his role in all this?
You've hit the nail on the head, Grace. According to Time and MedPage Today, Secretary Kennedy has explicitly expressed intentions to make deep cuts to the department's staff, particularly at the National Institutes of Health. He's been especially critical of employees involved in past nutrition guideline decisions, suggesting these might be areas where he's looking to make the deepest cuts. The Trump administration, reportedly with assistance from Elon Musk, has been actively working to reduce federal workforce numbers as part of their cost-cutting agenda.
This seems like a particularly sensitive time for such dramatic cuts. Aren't there some ongoing public health concerns that might be affected?
That's what has many public health experts worried, Grace. The CDC is currently assisting with a measles outbreak that has affected over 220 cases across several U.S. jurisdictions, primarily impacting unvaccinated children. This is happening while lawmakers are simultaneously debating potential cuts to Medicaid. It's creating what some might call a perfect storm of public health challenges.
Is there any protection for employees who are working on critical public health responses?
That's the concerning part. According to Perplexity, while positions related to border security, immigration enforcement, law enforcement, national security, and public safety are typically exempt from workforce reductions, public health roles aren't explicitly listed as exempt in the available information. There's no clear indication that the administration has conducted specific impact assessments on how these workforce reductions might affect ongoing public health emergency responses.
So what might be the long-term impact of these buyouts on our public health infrastructure?
The potential consequences are significant. The loss of skilled employees could seriously compromise the CDC's ability to monitor, investigate, and respond to outbreaks effectively. This is particularly concerning during active situations like the current measles outbreak, where timely intervention is crucial. Many experts fear that staff reductions could lead to gaps in critical services and potentially weaken the nation's ability to address future health crises. I guess you could say they're offering a wealth of health buyouts that might leave our public health system feeling rather ill-equipped.
Thank you for that comprehensive report, Chloe. We'll certainly be keeping an eye on how this federal diet plan affects our nation's health agencies in the coming months. Here are some other headlines. North Korea has fired several ballistic missiles into the Yellow Sea in response to the annual joint military exercises between the United States and South Korea. The Freedom Shield exercise, which began Monday and runs until March 20th, includes computer-simulated drills and practical training. North Korea views these exercises as rehearsals for invasion and condemned them as a dangerous provocation. The missiles, believed to be close range with a range under 185 miles, were launched from Hwanghae Province hours after the drills began. South Korean and U.S. forces have heightened surveillance and maintain full readiness. Live-fire training has been paused after an incident involving South Korean fighter jets mistakenly bombing a civilian area. Israel has cut off electricity supply to Gaza, severely impacting a crucial desalination plant that was providing drinking water to the Deir al-Balah area. The plant, which normally produces 18,000 cubic meters of water daily, will now operate on generators with output reduced to just 2,500 cubic meters. This action is part of Israel's strategy to pressure Hamas into accepting an extension of the ceasefire's first phase and releasing more hostages. Hamas has described this as a starvation policy violating international law, while the United Nations has criticized the move as potential collective punishment. The International Criminal Court has previously suggested Israel might be using starvation as a warfare method, which Israel denies. Former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney has won the Liberal Party leadership election and will replace Justin Trudeau as Canada's Prime Minister. Trudeau announced his resignation on January 6, following declining polls and internal pressures, including the resignation of Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland. Carney secured victory on the first ballot, defeating competitors including Freeland, Government House Leader Karina Gould, and former MP Frank Baylis. Approximately 400,000 registered Liberal Party members were eligible to vote in the election, which used a preferential ballot system. Trudeau and Carney will now determine the timing for the transition of power, with a federal election potentially following within weeks. Elon Musk's leadership of the Department of Government Efficiency, DOG, has sparked controversy as the initiative bypasses elected officials in its quest to slash government spending. Implementing corporate-style cost-cutting measures, including a drastic $1 limit on government credit cards, Musk's approach mirrors strategies he used at Twitter. The effort has faced legal challenges, with courts questioning the legality of layoffs and other cuts. Republican senators have informed Musk that significant cuts require congressional approval through a process called rescission. Critics argue this approach undermines the democratic process, while government workers report difficulties performing their jobs under the new restrictions. Bernie Sanders has emerged as a leading figure in the anti-Trump resistance, drawing massive crowds at rallies across the country. At 83, the Vermont senator has attracted 9,000 people in suburban Detroit and thousands more in Wisconsin communities. Sanders is strategically holding events in swing districts represented by Republicans, warning against what he describes as a move toward oligarchy under Trump. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez plans to join Sanders on the campaign trail in coming weeks, praising his unique ability to galvanize support. Sanders' initiative fills a leadership void, as Democrats have struggled to unify around a message opposing Trump's aggressive policies since his return to office. And now for our third story of the morning. As marijuana legalization expands across the country, law enforcement faces a growing challenge: how to detect drivers who are high. Joining us to discuss this issue is our reporter Ethan Parker. Ethan, what makes detecting cannabis impairment so difficult compared to alcohol?
Well, Grace, it's a real joint effort to solve this problem, if you'll pardon the pun. According to reporting from WBFO, the fundamental issue is that THC, the psychoactive component in marijuana, can remain in a person's system long after the high has worn off. Unlike alcohol, where breathalyzers provide a clear measure of impairment with established legal limits, there's no high standard, so to speak, for cannabis.
So what methods are officers currently using to identify potentially impaired drivers?
They're really weeding through several options, Grace. Currently, officers rely on traditional field sobriety tests that assess coordination and balance, but these were primarily designed for alcohol detection. Some departments have specially trained drug recognition experts, or DREs, who conduct more comprehensive evaluations, but their assessments can be subjective. Chemical tests of blood, urine, or saliva can detect THC, but don't necessarily reflect current impairment levels.
I understand there are some new technologies being developed. Can you tell us about those?
Absolutely. Several companies are trying to blaze a trail in this area. Canopix Technologies has developed updated marijuana breathalyzer technology focused on detecting recent use of Delta-9 THC, featuring a smaller, lightweight breath collection unit. Another company, Hound Labs, has created a cannabis breathalyzer that can detect THC in breath samples, though their initial model requires lab analysis.
Are there other detection methods beyond breathalyzers?
Yes, there's quite a buzz around some alternative approaches. WBFO reports that gaze impairment detection technology uses automated ocular tests to detect drug impairment with claimed accuracy exceeding 98%. It's already being used by businesses and law enforcement in several states, Some jurisdictions are also experimenting with cognitive ability apps and eye-tracking technologies that might provide more objective measurements than traditional tests.
Has there been any research on how marijuana legalization has affected traffic safety?
That's a high-priority research question, Grace. Studies cited by WBFO show mixed results. Overall, recreational marijuana legalization has been associated with a 6.5% increase in injury crash rates and a 2.3% increase in fatal crash rates across states that have legalized. But the effects vary significantly by state. Colorado saw a 17.8% increase in injury crashes, while California experienced a smaller 5.7% rise. Interestingly, Washington actually saw a decrease in fatal crash rates despite more drivers testing positive for marijuana in fatal crashes.
What are the main challenges in developing reliable detection methods?
They're facing some serious roadblocks, Grace. Any new technology must be legally defensible in court, which requires scientific validation. Unlike alcohol's 0.08% BAC limit, there's no established threshold for THC impairment, and individual factors like tolerance, metabolism, and time since consumption significantly affect how THC impacts different people, making universal standards difficult to establish.
So what's the path forward here?
Experts quoted by WBFO suggest we need a joint operation, if you will, a multifaceted approach. Some argue that relying solely on police training is too subjective, while others emphasize public education to prevent high driving altogether. Most researchers believe we'll need a combination of technologies, officer training, and awareness campaigns. As of today, March 10, 2025, no U.S. state has officially adopted any of these emerging technologies for law enforcement use, though several are conducting pilot programs.
Thanks for that illuminating report, Ethan. Sounds like states are racing to find solutions before this problem gets any higher.
They certainly are, Grace. Back to you.
That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 3.7, Gemini Flash 2.0, the Perplexity API, and the Google Cloud Text-to-Speech API. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.